And the recording will be sent out via email sometime tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. Also attached to that recording, there will be a questionnaire. We just ask that you take the time, fill that out. We value your feedback. It should take you no more than 2 minutes to fill that out. But keep an eye out for that email. It'll come sometime tomorrow with the recording and the questionnaire. We do have the chat open, but we will have a designated Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you do have questions, feel free to post those into the chat during the Q&A session, or if you'd like to take yourself off mute and ask your question, please feel free to do so. Whatever you are most comfortable with, we can do. So reminder, Q&A at the end of the session, so I'd hold off on questions until the end. And the chat is open to be able to ask those questions, or if you feel comfortable, take yourself off mute and go and ask those questions from there. From here, what I will do, I'm going to pass it over to Dara from the State Department. Are you ready to roll?
Thanks, RJ, for that great intro.
Yeah.
Ready to roll. I'm
Awesome.
Dara. Yeah. Let me start by sharing my screen here. All right. Are we all good from your end? Okay. So, my name is Dara Yin. I'm a diplomat in residence. I'm based here in Seattle. There are a number of us around the country, so whichever state you're in, there's probably someone like me that you can talk to about these opportunities. So my region is Alaska, Oregon, and Washington, but I'm always happy to talk to anyone from around the country. But a diplomat in residence is just a fancy title for a Foreign Service officer. I have been in the Foreign Service for about 20 years as a political officer, and now I act as a career guide and advisor for folks that are interested in these diplomatic opportunities. So with that, I want to say this this first slide is what I hope you get out of this presentation, that diplomacy is a lot of things. It's really a calling or a lifestyle, and it encompasses a lot of professions, a lot of skills, a lot of backgrounds. And it really is a life-changing way to pursue a career, just by virtue of living around the world, making a difference, experiencing different cultures and countries. And so with that, so what I hope you get out of this is the first part's probably the most important. It's the why. There are a lot of reasons for pursuing certain careers, and the why of diplomacy are such great personal and professional rewards. And I hope you see that. And then I'll talk a little bit about how. We have some great student programs and a lot of different career opportunities. And I'll throw up this QR code every once in a while. And if you're interested in signing up for our talent network, which just means you'll get notified about vacancies, you'll get notified about webinars, and you can find out more. All right, so first of all, a little bit about myself. I always say if you're going to take guidance or advice from someone, you should know a little bit about them. Everyone brings a different perspective and background to something. And so I want you to know a little bit about myself. I've put myself and my life and my career here on icons, so I've tried to summarize as best I could. As you can tell by the first line, it is my educational and professional background. And the message I want you to get out of this is that anyone from any background who has the right skills and talent can become a diplomat and can make a career of this. You know, I grew up from pretty humble backgrounds. My dad was an auto mechanic. My mom worked in a factory. I'm enlisted in the Army, so I'm a veteran. I went to Portland State University, which is a school with a lot of first generation university students, a lot of non-traditional students. So that kind of tells you the background that I came from. There was a time when the Foreign Service was a very elitist institution, but that time has passed. Let me tell you, the Foreign Service of today includes a lot of different people from different states, from different backgrounds, all walks of life. And then finally, the second part is you don't have to change who you are to be a diplomat. So this is a little bit about myself at the bottom, my interests, my hobbies. And I can tell you that when you go overseas as a diplomat, you don't have to leave that behind. You can pursue your interests, and a lot of times you can pursue your interests and integrate that into your work as a diplomat. Just a quick example is this bicycle icon here. I like to bicycle. And there have been a couple of tours where we have done some bicycle diplomacy. We've ridden around the communities on our bicycles. That way we can talk to people, because as you know, when you're on a bike, you can stop anytime. You can talk to people on the roads. And it was a great experience. So uh, in order for you to understand the life and the career of what a diplomat can be, I'm going to go through my own career because it's the easiest story to tell that I know of. I don't like talking about myself that much, but I hope that something in my story resonates with you that you can relate to and you can pick out of it. And so this is what I kind of want you to take out of my story. It's you can be part of something larger than yourself. You can become a better version of yourself. Lots of variety and job security. And at the same time, you can build a healthy financial future for you and your family. I'll pop up this slide again at the end, but I just want to preview some of the things that I've enjoyed in my career. So this map here is kind of a map of my career, my 20 years in the Foreign Service. As you can see, my current assignments in Seattle, pretty exotic, on the corner of the United States. But I've been able to go to 5 different countries, starting with North Macedonia. Then I went to India. I went to Colombia, Vietnam, and most recently I was in Poland. And then the little blue tags here are just the countries I visited for work or for tourism. What's not represented here is in all the countries that I've been assigned to, I've done a lot of in-country travel. So most of the time I try to go to every corner of that country and see what it's like. So where have I been? So my first tour was in North Macedonia. This was before the iPhone, so my pictures are from those old digital cameras, if you remember those. Uh, but the message here for you is that when you go overseas, you're part of a community, right? So the middle pictures here are the embassy community celebrating various events, including Halloween. You get to experience the culture. I went to a lot of local weddings, which is fascinating. And then I like nature, I like hiking. And as I said before, you can enjoy your interests and hobbies while you're overseas. So I did a lot of hiking while I was in North Macedonia. Next, I went to New Delhi. In New Delhi, I did a consular tour. So if you're a Foreign Service officer, everyone starts their first or second tour doing consular work, which I'll explain later, but it's dealing with visas, it's working to protect American citizens, etc. So in New Delhi, there was a lot of variety, I can tell you, and the opportunities to travel throughout the country were wonderful. We also went to every corner of that country. My wife's also a diplomat, and you can see here she met the Dalai Lama during her work as the human rights officer at the embassy. So it was an amazing experience. Um, in the middle there, we went to a village of a coworker and met his family, which was a very large village. He was kind of like the village elder, and so when we visited the village with him, it was an amazing experience. This elephant here, we rented an elephant for my daughter's first birthday, something you can do overseas as a diplomat. It's just an amazing life. I then went to Colombia as a political officer. In Colombia, I worked on domestic politics. I worked on post-conflict reconstruction, which was helping communities rebuild after they were made safe from either narcotics traffickers or rebels or that sort of thing. And so one of the things about the Foreign Service I love is field work. I love getting out of the office. I was the kid in elementary school who was always looking forward to the next field trip to the museum or to the nature park or whatever it was. And so getting out of the office was really important to me. And so some pictures here of me visiting some villages, working on an elections observation mission. So as a political officer, one of the things I did was organize the embassy's election observation mission to about 30 cities to give the Colombians the confidence to vote in their democratic elections. So after Colombia, I went to Vietnam. In Vietnam, I covered humanitarian demining. I also covered regional security, things like the South China Sea. And so it was one of the most rewarding experiences in my career was doing the humanitarian demining program. I managed a program with a budget of about $10 million a year. And as you can see on the left-hand side there, we did a lot of work cleaning up the bombs from the Vietnam War. And this was part of our building a bridge to the future. And so one of the fun things I did was plant a tree with one of the local organizations to represent the fact that we were planting trees for where future generations can enjoy the shade and the fruits of those trees. And that's kind of like diplomacy in a nutshell. It's a lot of long-term investments, a lot of bridge building, a lot of relationships. It's also a lot of explaining one another to each other. And so the picture there is a student group that was visiting Vietnam. And so we were explaining to them why the relationship with Vietnam mattered and where it was going and helping kind of facilitate those people to people ties. In my last tour, I was in Poland. I was there during the pandemic, and I was there during the start of the Russian invasion into Ukraine. And so it was a very significant experience. We could feel the impact we're having on the course of world events. One of the most rewarding things I did was that I was at the Ukrainian border at the start of the invasion, and one of the things we did was evacuate tens of thousands of U.S. citizens into safety. And we also helped facilitate the escape of millions of Ukrainian refugees into Poland. And so the picture in the middle there is Ukrainian children doing art therapy to deal with the trauma of war. And the picture on the bottom right is at the beginning of the conflict, there were very long lines of refugees trying to escape. And so our international allies and the embassy worked together to draw down those lines and the waits from about 3 or 4 days to 3 or 4 hours. And so that was really rewarding. I worked on President Biden's visit. That was a special moment. And that when you're overseas as a diplomat, it's a family endeavor. So the bottom left is the president meeting the embassy's children. My children are in the crowd there. So not only do I get to enjoy the rewards of this life, this career, that my children do as well. So back to what I've gotten out of this career. So going just down the list, you can see that you do feel like you're part of something larger than yourself. And the assignments, as they go on, they get progressively more challenging. You get more responsibility as you move up the career ladder. And you find out that you do become definitely a better version of yourself. You're constantly doing professional development. You're always in a state of slight discomfort in a good way, which means you're being challenged and you're growing. You're learning constantly. I've spent 3 years of my career learning languages. I've spent another 2 years probably in training, leadership development. I like variety, and so you get to switch jobs every 2 or 3 years. You rotate these assignments, you reinvent yourself, you renew yourself, and you see different parts of the world. And then the financial benefits are more than just the pay scale. In a federal career in the Foreign Service, you can retire when you're 50. Your housing is provided overseas. You have a great pension system. And so these are all the types of things that you get out of this career. And so you saw where my assignments were clustered, but this is the map of our full worldwide presence. We have about 270 embassies and consulates around the world. So there are a lot of options and places where you can go and experience the world. So whatever interests you. Some people like to focus on one region. Some people like to bounce around the world. Some people like to go where the surfing is the best, where the food is the best, where the craft beer is the best. So a lot of that is in your control and part of your career. You can kind of figure out where you want to go. All right, now I'm going to take a step back a little bit and talk a little bit about the idea of being something bigger than part of something bigger than yourself. This is our mission. It's so general as to be almost a non-definition, but basically diplomacy is a lot of things, and it covers a lot of different aspects of society. And the most simple way I can describe it is it's how we decide to live with each other in the world, despite our differences. And so that could include education, it can include science, the economy, trade, tourism, security, politics. There is a lot going on in diplomacy. U.S. diplomacy is unique in the fact that a lot of countries promote their security and prosperity, but ours are grounded in these core democratic values that have a double benefit. They're both make your foreign policy more effective, and it's also a lot of times it's the right thing to do. Of course, we're not perfect. I can talk about that later, about ways that we foster debate and dissent within the organization, but the idea is that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different ways you can contribute. Just a quick note, again, tying into that earlier slide about my background, is that the organization is looking for all different types of people, all different backgrounds, and Again, it's the right thing to do, and it's also the most effective thing to do. Different perspectives, different backgrounds bring a lot to the organization, and we need those viewpoints. As I mentioned, we have a culture of debate, discussion, and we want to make sure that the people who are representing America and explaining America are from all parts of America. Okay, so just a little bit more about the organization. I bring this up because we are a people-centric organization. Our power is in our people and our ideas and their efforts, their motivation. And you can, as part of the organization, you'll see that you do have a voice early. We're a small organization. We're about 75,000 people. You compare that to our fellow National Security Agency, Department of Defense, that has over 700,000 civilian employees. That doesn't even count the military. You look at the Foreign Service employees, there's about 13,000 of us, 14,000 of us. So there are more military musicians than there are Foreign Service diplomats. So my point is that we're a lean and mean organization as far as bureaucracies go. It's all relative. And so when you join the Foreign Service, you'll find that your voice is being listened to early. You may first, second, or third tour, you may be advising an ambassador or a senior official, putting your recommendations out there. I also want to point out the 12,000 civil service employees. If you decide that you don't want to pursue a career moving overseas all the time, we do have 12,000 jobs in Washington, D.C., where you can contribute to U.S. diplomacy, but be rooted domestically. And then most importantly, we have about 50,000 employees who are locals of that country that work in the embassy. They are the heart and the soul of the embassies. So, for example, we had hundreds of Poles working in the embassy in Poland, the Vietnamese who work at our embassy in Vietnam. And these are the people that really do believe in our values and work at the embassy because they think that a strong relationship with the United States is better for everyone. So now here's the kind of the nitty gritty of the career tracks and the how. The first type of Foreign Service person, as you kind of saw from that other slide, are the Foreign Service officers. These are kind of analogous to the leadership track. They are the ones that eventually usually become deputy ambassadors or ambassadors. And there are 5 main career themes. You can kind of see those here: consular, economic, management, political, and public diplomacy. And since you can read the slide yourself, I would say that the differences between the career tracks are how you're focused in your efforts. So, for example, management officers are focused internally on operations. So if you like running things, you like operations, budgets, human resources, that's for you. So you deal with the interagency, you deal with the MC community, and making sure there's a platform for policy work to happen. The political and economic officers are very similar. Their trade craft or the way they do their jobs are the same. They're one part investigative journalists. They go out there, they talk to experts, they form opinions about policy, they provide policy recommendations or reports for the policymakers in Washington to understand what's going on in the country that you're at. They organize events. They may organize the visit of high-level officials, as you saw earlier, members of Congress, cabinet secretaries, on down the government. And then they're policy advocates. So they could advocate externally. So you may go to your host government and advocate for a U.S. policy. You may advocate internally within the U.S. government to pursue a certain policy towards the country that you're working in. Consular officers, their focus is the people to people and citizens. So on one hand, they're almost like a social worker in that they deal with American citizens in distress, American citizens in jail, with health issues, deaths in the family. They also help facilitate travel, legitimate travel to the United States through the processing of visas. And finally, public diplomacy, they share a lot of goals with the political and economic officers, but their investments tend to be long-term and their methods of communication tend to be mass methods. So press, social media, they invest a lot in education and cultural exchanges to seed those seeds of understanding so that later generations will have a good, favorable opinion of U.S. values in our country. A lot of times they identify up-and-coming leaders in that country and they bring them to the U.S. so that they can form a good opinion of the United States. It's one of the most successful foreign policy programs since the Cold War is the LEADER program. Okay, so Those are the Foreign Service officers, and the main way you become a Foreign Service officer, which I can cover later, is through the test. But I wanted to cover other types of careers in the Foreign Service, and you can think of these as the technical specialists. They are hired to do a specific job, and they're very expert in their fields. And so there are different categories. And so if you're interested in doing budgets or human resources, you're a medical provider, you're interested in law enforcement, IT, construction, facilities management, there's something out there for you. If you go to our website, careers.state.gov, you can find out more about these jobs, or I can answer what I can in the Q&A. I wanted to highlight a special program for speakers of Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. So you can do a 5-year fellowship with the State Department if you want to get your foot in the door into the Foreign Service, or you think you're only good for 1 or 2 tours in the Foreign Service. So this is a 5-year program. You'll do 2 tours using the language, and you'll work in a consular section doing those duties there on the screen, the consular career track. So all Foreign Service officers do consular work at the beginning of the career. So it's almost as if you were just doing the part of career as an entry-level Foreign Service officer. And these are just a quick note on the civil service jobs. Finding civil service jobs is a lot less regular than it is for Foreign Service jobs. Foreign Service jobs tend to take applications on a schedule and vacancy announcements, but these civil service jobs, they're more like traditional jobs in that they come up from time to time, and then you just have to really keep an eye out on the vacancy announcements at USA Jobs. Again, they cover a lot of different topics, and so the people who work in Washington, they work on a wide range of things from administration to technology, basically everything that involves the State Department operations. Okay, so what are we looking for in people who want to work in the Foreign Service? So these are what you're assessed on. These are the attributes. There's no rocket science here. You can see that these basically would help you in any profession, really. And the one thing I want to say is that if you're looking to apply for a job in the Foreign Service, you should take a look at these, go to our website, kind of read a little bit more about them, and kind of do a self-assessment and see how you're doing in these areas. We don't expect people to be masters in these areas, but we're looking for demonstrated potential because for most jobs in the Foreign Service, we hire at the entry level, and then through professional development and you're on the job training, you'll develop these skills almost in like a trade model where you come in as an apprentice diplomat, and then you become a journeyman diplomat, and then eventually you're a master diplomat, and you're applying these skills and abilities at ever increasing levels of mastery. I started the written communication one because most applications do start on the written form. So as you're telling your story to the people who are doing the evaluations of candidates, you have to do it through written communication. And it's very important to have that honed because that really is the window on how they can tell who you are and what you're capable of. Okay, on to student opportunities. And so if anyone's still like early in their studying or as a continuing student thinking about grad school later, these are sort of opportunities and ways that you can explore diplomacy at the State Department. We've made a change in the last couple of years, and all of our internships are essentially paid now. And that idea is to level the playing field, make sure that people from all backgrounds have access to these internships. And so they will provide you with transportation out to your internship location, a salary, housing. It is a really good deal. As you can tell, these interns here are smiling. They're happy because they're getting paid. They have a house, and they're having a wonderful experience. And that's our Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. And so that tells you the importance we put on this program, that if he's available, he'll meet, most Secretaries of State will meet the intern class that's coming in, because we know that this is the future of the organization and the people that will come contribute. So the first major internship program is aptly titled the Student Internship Program. And we take in 3 cohorts a year. And the key things here is you have to have a 3.2 cumulative GPA and to really pay attention to the application schedule. Because of the requirements for a security clearance, you have to apply about 8 months out. And so you have to plan ahead, and you have to be a continuing student and be a junior as you're done with the internship. More information on the website, but the key there is you gotta think really far ahead. The applications for the fall internships will be opening soon and likely in February. So that kind of gives you the idea of how far ahead that you have to apply. This is another type of internship program. It's called the U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program. So the difference between this one and the other one is that the other one is a broad-based internship program where it's mostly merit-based, but you can volunteer your FAFSA if you want. Whereas this program is specifically needs and merit-based. And it's a 2-summer program. And you can read on the slide there what that entails. So it's a really good deal. And part of the program too is they'll walk you through the Foreign Service Officer test and give you familiarity with taking that assessment, because half the battle of these standardized tests is just understanding the format and how it's given. And so that's part of the program. A really good deal. And this program you generally apply at the end of summer. And so if you're a sophomore and junior, look in late August to apply for this. All right, fellowships, more great deals and opportunities to explore the State Department. And so the first two there, the Pickering and the Wrangell fellowships, they pay for 2 years of graduate school, and it leads to an appointment as a Foreign Service Officer. So as you can imagine, this is a highly competitive program, but if you're interested, it's worth applying for. It's worth applying for everything you're interested in because there's so many opportunities and a lot of them are competitive, but the more doors you knock on, the more likely one of those doors is to open. And so I applied for a lot of things when I came through, and so just you never know which door is going to open first. So Pickering and Wrangell Fellowship, if you're going to apply for one, apply for both. The applications are at the same time, and they're nearly identical. The only difference between the two is where you do your practicum. So each fellowship includes 1 summer practicum after your first year of grad school in Washington, D.C. For the Wrangell, you do it in Congress, and for the Pickering, you do it in the State Department. And then for the second year after you graduate from grad school, for both fellowships, you do the practicum at an embassy, and then you come in as a Foreign Service Officer. If you're specifically interested in a career as an IT officer in the State Department or a law enforcement officer in the State Department, there are 2 special fellowships for you. Again, they pay for 2 years of grad school and lead to a appointment. For the IT fellowship, it's a little special because you do have the option, if you're a sophomore, to apply for 2 years of undergraduate funding. So that is the only one that pays for undergrad. So again, more information on our website. And a couple of gateway programs into the civil service. And so the PMF program is also a great program. It funds graduate school, but then you come in as a civil service officer. My wife was a PMF, and so when you're a PMF, what you do is you rotate around the State Department for 2 years, and she did a rotation in an embassy. And then with that experience, she used it to pass the Foreign Service Officer test. So lots of people use that as a foot in the door to gain great experience for later career paths. Okay, so that comes to the end of my formal presentation. I just wanted to note this is a tradition in the Foreign Service. It's called Flag Day. And so when you join the Foreign Service, you'll go into an orientation class. And the first week you're there, you'll get a list of vacancies for your job and your career track. And then you'll put down your preferences. And about 5 or 6 weeks in, you will be assigned. And so the dreaming starts early. You'll get to look at where you're going and start thinking about your post of assignment. And Flag Day is a fun tradition. We have a lot of good times with it. As you can see, people are excited. They got their assignments. And you can look at the flags to kind of see what first assignments kind of look like. And then finally, like I cover Alaska, Oregon, and Washington. And so if you go to careers.state.gov, connect with a diplomat, you can find the diplomat in residence for your state. Whatever your connection is to that state, whether you grew up there or you work there, you live there now, we're not super strict about the definitions of the region. So reach out where you have a connection. Reach out to me if you're from my states. With that, I'll go back to main screen for Q&A.
We did have one question that came in just during the session, but before I get to that, just a reminder, everyone, if you do want to ask questions, I'm going to give people the ability to take themselves off mute. If you want to come off mute and ask your question, or if you feel more comfortable posting them in the chat, you certainly can do that. But first question. Is it possible to choose the country and city for your mission before hire?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so individual that they plan on living abroad in
Hmm.
the near future. Their wife with their wife in their in her home country. They're a U.S. citizen. Is it possible to choose the country and city for your mission before hire?
Okay, no, when you accept an appointment, they don't let you know what the vacancies are at the time, and you really have to be worldwide available. The chances of that particular country and city being on the list, I don't think you can bet on it. So you have to come in with an open mind, flexibility, and you may be able to get there eventually, but it's not a direct path.
Awesome. Next question, is there an age restriction?
There is. For various jobs, they kind of range, but for Foreign Service Officer, you have to be 20 when you register for the test, with the idea that you'll be 21 before you're appointed as a Foreign Service Officer. And you have to be about 59 and a half on the top end. And so there are exceptions for veterans. So veterans can register later, past 59, but we have a mandatory retirement age of 65 according to US law. And so people who come in at the end of their careers have one or two tours and then they have to retire. That being said, our orientation classes range from 22 to 59 or 60. And we bring like, there's no, we're not looking for any type of early career, mid career, or late career. It's just what you bring to the table. And so we're looking for all walks of life. Rules are different for law enforcement and certain other jobs, so you just have to look at the vacancy announcement very carefully.
Next question, do you always start with a posting in Washington, D.C.?
For the Foreign Service is actually the opposite. So for most Foreign Service jobs, you start your career overseas. For Foreign Service officers, you're likely to do two tours overseas, one of those in a consular section. And then for the other specialties as well, you would start overseas. And then you usually come back to Washington after you get tenure mid-career because Washington is kind of the decision-making body, policy-making. And so after you have some field experience, then you can come back and do Washington. But that being said, you can design your career both ways. Some people are overseas their entire career. Some people like to come back domestically a lot for various reasons, or half and half, or something like that.
Awesome. Next question. Any programs to help with getting security clearances? Any pathways for a senior pursuing a degree in cybersecurity and information assurance?
So for the security clearance, that's part of the assessment process. So if you pass the assessment for the job that you're applying for, then you'll go into the security clearance process and the medical clearance process. And that usually takes the longest part. So the security clearance could take anywhere from 12 to 18 months. The entire process can take anywhere from 12 to 24 months. And depending on where you've lived, your life experiences, that affects the length of time. If you have clearances from other agencies, that helps, but it's you still have to get a State Department clearance at the top secret level for most jobs. For the IT assurance and cybersecurity specifically, those would be in the civil service usually because they're very specialized. You just have to look for vacancies in those jobs as they come up. Um, we do our IT officers overseas are uh, in the line of management information systems, so you'll be managing the resources of the embassy. But later on in your career, you can move over into cybersecurity if you'd like in that career track.
Next question is, what languages, in your opinion, are the most in demand for foreign service?
So some of them include Mandarin, Arabic, Urdu. Let me see here. We have so as part of the Foreign Service assessments, there are certain critical needs languages that give you extra points on the hiring list. So after you pass the assessments, you get your clearance, you go on a eligible hire list. And then based on how much money Congress gives us that year and how many people we can hire, we go down the list for that job. And so you can get bonus points from veteran status or critical needs languages. And currently, the critical needs languages are Arabic, Chinese Mandarin, Hindi, Korean, Pashto, Persian, Dari, and Persian Farsi, as well as Urdu.
Next question, does having more of a background in a specific country or region increase the likelihood of being sent there?
It depends. A lot of these answers are going to start with it depends because there's a lot of variety in the career. So the way it works is just for the Foreign Service now, your first couple of assignments are directed by the State Department. And so you're going to put in a preference list and they will consider these things and then they will tell you where to go. Usually they do that because there are certain milestones you have to hit to make tenure, and they want to make sure you hit those milestones. Once you reach tenure, the assignment process completely different. So you start competing for jobs, and every year or the year before it's time for you to transfer, you'll get a list of vacancies for the world that match your job and your rank, and you'll decide on which of those to compete for. And it's up to you. They're never going to send you anywhere you don't compete for. We're not like the military where if you don't have a job, they just send you somewhere. If you don't have a job, then you just have to find another job. You know, you compete for things, you find new jobs to compete for. And so the answer there is, if you have a certain background, interest, language skills in a certain region, you can compete for those jobs, and you're probably going to be more competitive.
Next question, is there opportunities for business majors?
Yeah, there are lots of opportunities for business majors. First, I would say for Foreign Service officers, the major doesn't matter for the most part. I'm a business major. I majored in information systems, and I am now a political officer. So, and then the opposite can happen where someone in international relations decides that they're interested in press, or we have a lot some we have a lot of interesting enough we have a lot of theater and drama majors in the Foreign Service, but it makes sense if you think about it a lot. They're good at relating to audiences, they're good at building rapport, they have a lot of cross-cultural experience, they perform well under pressure. So there you go. So if you're applying for the Foreign Service officer test, it doesn't matter what your major is. If you want to major, if you want to look at the specialties, those jobs that I showed on the second slide, business majors can look at human resources, they can look at finance, those types of jobs in the specialties.
Next question, is there a fitness requirement to be a diplomat?
There is not. There is a fitness test for the law enforcement agent, but otherwise there isn't. You do have to be medically cleared, so you have to, the reason for that is you may be sent to a country where the healthcare system is not as good as the United States. So that's why they want to make sure that you have a good ability to get to the care you need. And the medical clearance process has changed recently again to be more inclusive. And so we no longer have to be what's called like worldwide available tip-top health. So now no one should self-select out because of health issues. Go through the process, and then when the time comes for your medical clearance, you'll have a conversation with our medical division to talk about reasonable accommodations if necessary.
Next question, are there any temporary internship or fellowship options for a graduate with a master's degree?
So someone who's already graduated, there aren't a lot of student opportunities left for you. I think at that point you need to start looking at the career opportunities, unless you're a continuing student. So if you're got your master's degree and then you decide to go on and continue your graduate education, you can apply for the internships.
The next one, individual asked, I love international relations and cybersecurity. Is there something that combines the two, or must we put ourselves in one box? So I would have to pick IT specifically.
Yeah, so There's a lot of different ways that you can pursue that interest. One of them is our economic officers. Like if you're interested in cybersecurity from a policy standpoint, our economic officers do the policy work. They negotiate the cybersecurity programs and treaties. They work with the cybersecurity authorities in different countries. That being said, that would be one aspect of your career as an economic officer. You will do other things during your career because foreign service officers are generalists, so we're expected to become experts in our portfolio wherever we go, and that could be really wide ranging, which I find attractive. But if you wanted to specialize in cybersecurity, it would be more looking at the civil service side or the IT professional side. But again, if you want to approach it from the policy side, probably foreign service officer.
The next one, what language proof of ability is needed if the individual is in the US?
So if you want to qualify for bonus points in a language, we have a testing program. And so you would organize a test with our Language Institute to get a score on your language ability in whatever language that you think you have proficiency in. And if written communication, and if we're talking about the English language, written communication and verbal communication is really important. We are a writing organization, and we communicate through a lot through paper and through words. And so that is really a key component of the dimensions that I showed you earlier.
Thank you. As these assessments are these assessments completed domestically or overseas?
The assessments for the Foreign Service are completed domestically. So we do offer testing overseas. So the Foreign Service Officer Test, which is given 3 times a year. The registration is open right now for the winter test, but we also give it in early summer and we give it in early fall. So you can take the test, the Foreign Service Officer Test. You can apply for any of the Foreign Service Specialist jobs once a year, once every 12 months. And that includes multiple applications. So if you want to apply for law enforcement agent, you can do that once every 12 months. Foreign Service Officer Test once every 12 months. IT officer once every 12 months if you qualify for all of those jobs. And so the Foreign Service Officer Test is given overseas. A lot of the other assessments, there's some flexibility. Pearson VUE, our testing implementer, is also opening up an option for online testing. And so I would go to their website to see what qualifies for online testing. If you can do that from overseas, I'm not quite sure what Pearson VUE does on that mark, but maybe they have partners overseas. But you really just, I recommend going to the Pearson VUE website for whichever test or assessment you want to take and looking at the information there.
You touched on this a little bit, but are there any opportunities for education majors? So maybe recommendations as far as opportunities for individuals that are pursuing those degree programs?
Yeah, so the first one is just if you're interested in education as a policy issue, that would also be in the realm of the economic officer. It doesn't make quite intuitive sense, but there's a specialty within the economic officer that works on environment, science, technology, and health. And so that, a lot of that has to do with education and scientific exchange. Another way you could approach it is looking at our public diplomacy career track. Half of the public diplomacy officer is press, but the other half is education. So they deal a lot with the Fulbright scholars. Their primary contacts overseas are the universities. So if you like maintaining contact with universities, designing education programs or granting awards to NGOs that work on education, that sort of thing. That's public diplomacy. We do have a small specialty that works on, I don't know if it's quite related, but they manage a lot of our English language education programs. That's a smaller one that you can look at. And there's some library science as well, if that's what you're interested in. So there are some options there, whether you're interested in it from a broad perspective or highly specialized.
Next question, and this is a few questions kind of thrown into one here. How long are assignments generally? Can an individual take their family with them on assignment? Can you take your family to your training, and then will your significant other, so your spouse, have to also be an officer to go with you on assignment?
All right. Yeah. So all great questions. And I can say just kind of from a broad perspective that for the State Department, families and spouses are really important to us. I think we're one of the employers in the world that really cares how your kids and your family and your spouse are doing. And there's actually a designated office in the State Department that manages programs to make sure that things are going well for those components. There's an officer at every embassy that it's called the community liaison officer that specializes in the welfare, education for the kids and spousal employment and that sort of thing. So we understand that when you go overseas, it's a sacrifice, and your family is part of the community. They are part of the embassy. There's a lot of social and professional events that they can take part in, volunteer opportunities. So that's kind of the broad picture. Yes, you can bring your families. So the assignments range from about 1 to 3 years. And the way it happens is the 1 year assignments are the danger posts, usually, or extreme hardship posts. So think Iraq, Afghanistan when it was still open, 1 year assignments. And those are the places you can't take your family. Uh, Again, when we go back to the beginning, and I said that when you compete for jobs, if there's something that you never want to do, then you just don't compete for it. So I have never competed for those 1 year assignments because my family is very important to me. I've raised 3 kids overseas. So going to a family post was always important to my wife and I. And so we always competed for the known family posts. So yes, you can bring your family overseas. They get plane tickets. They get an allowance of weight to bring things with them. They get placed in really great schools. My kids love going to school overseas because they go to these wonderful international schools. The extracurricular activities are, I can't believe it. Like my daughters played basketball and they went when they were in Poland and they went on to tournaments in Munich and Istanbul. One daughter's in a rock band club and she went to a rock band festival in Croatia. I mean, these are things that I never would have imagined in high school that they were able to do. Really cool. And it's a real great benefit. So, yes, there are a lot of different aspects of that. And then as far as your spouse goes, they don't have to be an officer. They can be a spouse, but like I said, they are looked at after, and every spouse has a different experience that's not in the government. So some spouses like to do their own thing and they just integrate into the community. They find their own networks and they volunteer and they go find a cycling club. Some spouses like to work in the embassy. There's spousal employment. These are usually entry-level jobs, administrative, paraprofessional type jobs, but they're made available. And then depending on the country you're in, some spouses find work on the local economy. It just depends on the treaty we have with that country. And finally, we care about the kids. So there's a summer employment program, the best summer jobs ever. You get to go into the embassy and do filing or work with foreign service officers. I worked at a gas station in high school, so working at an embassy would be fantastic.
Next question. Is a low credit score a disqualifier to be a diplomat?
So I would say I wouldn't self-select out if you have a low credit score. Part of the clearance process is something called a suitability review, and they will take a look at your credit and finances. But as long as there's a reasonable story there, you're rebuilding, something happened. Maybe there's a lot of times where medical things happen, a disaster happens, and as long as you have a good explanation and you have a plan, they will take that into consideration. So don't self-select out. What they're looking for is a vulnerability, right? So, if you're in financial trouble, that makes you vulnerable to intelligence agencies, it makes you vulnerable to corruptions. And so that's why they do that review. And so as long as you have a good explanation and good things you can tell the panel, then don't self-select out.
Next question. Does your education dictate what pay grade you start at? So for example, if you have a master's degree, you start at a certain pay grade, a bachelor's, you start at a certain number?
That's correct. So when they make your offer, they have a pay band or a pay range that they can give you an offer in based on whatever job it is. For example, doctors are hired at one of our highest levels just because of the salary considerations, even though it's kind of an interesting thing where they're an entry-level foreign service officer, but they're at a pay grade that's very high. But most people at the entry-level ranks, they'll look at your education and your years of experience. And then when you get an offer, they'll also tell you what your salary offer is. And so there's a little bit of room you have to negotiate and appeal what that salary offer is, but the registrar will look at your education experience and then place you on the pay scale.
Next question, how does a candidate make a follow-up after passing an assessment?
Usually, each assessment track has an email address where you can write into, whether it's the OMS track assessment or the FSOT or what stage you are. So I would look for that. There's usually a package you get after you take the assessment. And so that's all else fails. You could always, there's a email address. I think it's, I'll look it up again, but I think it's on our website. It's like careers@state.gov or something like that, which is the catch-all. And if you email that, they can redirect you. But you can also look at the vacancy announcement for which you apply, and there's usually a contact email that you can write to.
Another question, and you did touch on this, so I think this person jumped in a little late. Are there internship opportunities for graduate students?
There are, as long as you're a continuing student and you have enough time left in your schooling to apply. So again, for graduate students, that would probably be the student internship program, and you have to be a continuing student, and you'll have to apply 8 months out for either fall cohort, the spring cohort, or the summer cohort. And then you have to be continuing school afterwards. So we do have a lot of doctoral students. We have law school students. Then they have plenty of time left on their schooling where they can apply for one of these internships. And again, they're paid. So if you have to take fall or spring off, then hopefully that provides you with the means to take that time off and maybe work with your program, whether you can get credit for it or not. I don't know. A lot of universities give credits per practicum, but there's a lot of considerations there. So talk to your advisor.
Next one is, so regarding salary, if you go in at one education level, can you get a fair increase on your pay if you get the next level degree while employed by the Department of the State?
Yeah, unless so once you're in, the way your salary increases is through promotions and through years of service. So you'll you'll go through the tenuring process, and once you're tenured, you'll be considered for promotion, and that's how you increase your salary. Once you're in, adding degrees doesn't increase your salary. But that being said, we are an organization that's designed for professional development. So every time you're evaluated, you're expected to demonstrate that you're moving up the ladder and demonstrating more experience, and your promotions should come regularly, and your salary will build. You'll find that over time it builds quite nicely towards the end of your career.
Next one, can you get an incentive bonus in certain fields such as IT?
That's a good question. I'm going to have to take that one back. I haven't heard of any bonuses recently, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. So yeah, I'm not sure on that one.
Are there any tips that you can provide that might increase an individual's chances of getting into an internship?
The internships are very competitive. Yes, we get a lot of applications, especially now that we've leveled the playing field with the paid salary and everything. But we're trying to increase the number of internships. That being said, they're worth applying for. You have to really make sure that your writing is impeccable for your submissions to the student internship program. Everything that a writing coach would tell you, have someone else read it, make sure there are no spelling and grammar mistakes. It's your opportunity to tell your story, what your motivation is for wanting to do the internship. So be sincere, but also be cognizant of those dimensions that I mentioned earlier, and it's a lot to do in a very short written format, but it's a trick, and that's part of the challenge. But if you can accomplish the task of telling your story, demonstrating why you're motivated to do this and all of your skills and abilities, that's your goal. And then, like I said, have trusted friends or advisors read your essays. More eyes are better. Take their feedback, because sometimes we write things that seem clear to us but are not clear to others. And then finally, just be persistent. You may apply for one cohort and not get it. Apply again if you're eligible. It's worth it. These are great internships. And also, finally, read the instructions very carefully on eligibility and filling out the USA Jobs website because a lot of times the first layer of the application process can be an algorithm or a filter. So you got to make sure that you read those questions very carefully and you make sure that you're eligible and you answer them correctly. Otherwise, a human may never actually see the application.
How long are internships generally, and can a student going to school for their undergrad apply for these internships?
Uh, Second part of the question is easy. Yes, you can start applying when you're a sophomore because as long as you're kind of timing it so that you'll be a junior when you're done with the internship. We do have, there's a lot of opportunities. We have some programs for earlier in the career. Freshmen, sophomores earlier can apply for something called the Critical Language Scholarship. That's a great program. Just throwing that out there. And then, so yeah, and then let's see. What was the second part of the question again?
It was how long are internships?
Okay, thanks. They're about 10 weeks. And so I know if you're, I don't know if you're on a quarter system or a semester system, they kind of fit the semester system better than the quarter system in some states, but about 10 weeks.
And then staying on that internship topic, is there an age limit for internships?
Not that I know of. I'm going to have to look at the eligibility question very carefully, but the main one is continuing student. So that's a very good question. I'm going to go back and look at that, but look at the student internship page and it has eligibility there. And I don't remember seeing an age requirement, but I'm going to go back and look at that. But continuing student was the main one usually.
Next one is how hard is it to switch from civil service to foreign service?
It depends which route you take and which job you apply for. So a lot of times people who switch from civil service to foreign service just take the assessment like everyone else, but they are better equipped to take that assessment because they have experience in the State Department. They've developed skills, especially in an international or cross-cultural context, and they are very familiar with our organization. So that usually helps. And I've seen a lot of civil service people get offered a foreign service officer class, and usually everyone's cheering and rooting for them and telling them to go get their flag on Flag Day. And so for all of these opportunities, people understand if you take an offer in the foreign service. So if you start as a presidential manager's fellow, you get your call and you go, great. If you start as a consular fellow and you get your call and you go to a foreign service officer, fantastic. People are rooting for you. So that's one way they do it, just to be better equipped. There is a program, it's not used very often, where you can switch from civil service to foreign service. And it requires crossing a number of hurdles like filling hard to fill jobs overseas, hardship posts, but it's a program out there, but usually people just take the assessment and they cross over.
Next one that came in, what is the pay start out?
Depends a lot on which job. And so um, I'm just going to take Foreign Service Officer as an example. So Foreign Service Officer, generally, if you have a bachelor's degree and no experience, you're looking at mid 60s, something like that. If you have a master's degree and 20 years of experience, maybe closer to six figures. A lot of different factors there. So that's kind of the range. But when you look at our pay scales, just consider a couple things. One is when you're overseas, your housing's paid for, and that's a big bonus. You'll move up the ladder steadily, so the pay will get much better as you go along. And then there are all these professional development opportunities that you get between overseas tours. You get 30 days of what's called home leave from Congress because they want us to relearn America, become Americans again because we're representing us. So it doesn't come out of your vacation time. You get this month and you get to travel around the country. It's a great benefit. You get a lot of professional development. So I figured my 3 years in language training is like getting 3 bachelor's degrees in various languages. That's a huge benefit. So anyway, that's my pitch there.
Next one, do government shutdowns affect people in the Department of the State?
They do. They do. So I've been through a few of these in my career, and they've changed a lot since we're getting used to them internally in terms of our procedures. The best thing I could tell you is that a law was passed a bit ago, and that no matter what happens, you'll always get back pay, and so your paycheck may stop for a while. But according to U.S. law, the Congress, State Department has to give you back pay, so you'll be made whole eventually. And it depends on what part of the State Department you work in. There's parts of the organization that are considered essential, so you may continue working. Um, you may have to shut down yourself. Like uh, what I consider what I do essential, but I would probably shut down uh, and stop doing webinars while we don't have a budget. We're not allowed to travel and do a lot of public events. So it does affect us, yes. But I guess the main thing for you all is you'll be made whole after the shutdown ends.
Next one that came in, are internships only during the summer or are they year round?
Uh, they run year round. So the main internship program runs, and we have a fall cohort, spring cohort, and a summer cohort.
The next one that came in, is an economic officer a position within the Foreign Service Officer job, or is it a different department?
The economic officer is one of the career themes for foreign service officers. And so there's 5 career themes. And the thing about I call them career themes, it's like majoring in something because you can spend a lot of tours doing that, but you can also do other things. And so as an economic officer, that's your major, but you can also minor in being a political officer, being doing human rights, other types of things. And so there's a lot of flexibility in how you design your career once you get your tenure.
Next one, although salary is important considering today's economy, are there yearly salary incentives or raises? If so, how often?
It's up to the president and Congress, but I think throughout my career, it has generally been pretty decent in terms of inflation. So the 2024 pay increase was around 5% because of inflation. And so that was a very welcome salary adjustment. There have been years where the salary scale has been frozen, but in general, we find Congress really supports what we do. They understand we're a small organization, and there's a lot of support for our mission because the diplomacy is all those things that I talked about at the beginning. And we're kind of like preventative medicine. You don't notice it until it doesn't work right, and so we try to prevent the wars. We try to prevent the things that go wrong. We try to uh, uh, anyway. So uh, the answer is they have throughout my 20 years, it's been okay. It's been pretty good.
How many languages do foreign service officers typically speak?
It's a good question. So to get tenure, you have to speak one. It's one of the requirements that's laid out for tenure. And so if you don't come in with a foreign language, you will be trained in one. And so that's the good thing. If you come in with a foreign language, you may or may not train in another one. So it's up to you and your career development officer. And then if you want to become a senior diplomat, senior foreign service, kind of like the senior ranks, then you also have to re-demonstrate your proficiency in foreign language to cross into being a senior executive.
How long is the training for foreign service officers?
The basic training is now, so one of the things we've done is change the orientation class. It used to be that foreign service officers had separate orientations from the foreign service specialists, but we're one team, we work together, we're all diplomats, and so they've created a unified orientation, which is about 5 to 6 weeks. And then additional training will depend on your assignment. So if you get your first tour in the consular section doing visas and American citizen services, you'll do an extra number of weeks in consular training. If you get assigned to a post with language, you may spend another 6 months learning Spanish or French or whatever. If you're one of the technical specialties, IT officers have a lot of training. So my first job in the Foreign Service was actually as an IT officer. So when I talked about figuring out whichever path is open to you, the first path that opened to me was IT officer. So I came in as an IT officer. I spent 6 months in training when I came in. I learned everything about networks and information technology. And so a wide range. If you come in as a law enforcement officer, you go to the Foreign Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia, I think it is, and that's a long course. And so there's a wide range.
How does the housing work when you are abroad? Do you get a stipend and then pick where you want to live, or is that picked out for you?
So the vast majority of embassies and consulates have a housing pool. And what happens is the embassy community, there are people who are selected to be part of the housing committee. And then every season of transfers, they make housing assignments based on your profile, how many kids you have, your rank, and your preferences. So you'll put in, they'll send you a survey, you'll fill it out. Like generally, the way the survey goes is I want to live downtown close to the embassy, or I want to live in a townhouse halfway out, or I want to live in a single family home by the school because I have kids or I have a dog. And so they'll take all of that into consideration and the committee will assign you a house. There are a small number of posts where you get an allowance to go lease something on the local market, but those are rare because they don't want you dealing with the local real estate market to deter you from be a hassle in your job. So they want to present you with housing upon your arrival. And in my career, my housing's been pretty good. Of course, I come from I have relatively low standards. I When I joined the Foreign Service, I was single, and they gave me a 3 bedroom apartment. And it was awesome. I had my PlayStation and my bike, and I moved in, and it was so just doing laps around the apartment. It was the best thing ever. And so I say it's a good benefit. It's going to range depending on your post. You tend to get better housing in places that where your house is your social life, but if you're in London, then you might have a flat that we're kind of like living in New York, where the city is your home. So there's a wide variety, but for me, it's been pretty good.
Do you get to choose the language that you must have to gain tenure?
Uh, in a sense, you can put in your preferences. If you don't have a language and you need language training, then when you see the vacancies, and you choose which ones that you put on your preference list, then you get to choose that way. But at the end of the day, for your first 2 tours, the State Department will tell you where to go.
Can you stay in one country or do you have to change countries every 5 years?
You have to change countries, and it's usually average of 2 to 3 years. And for me, that's about right. But everyone's different, because like I said, I like to be continuously challenged. So I find by the second or third year, I kind of not learn the job 100%, but I'm comfortable, which means it's time for me to move on. And that's part of what I like about the job. And I move on to the next challenge. But there are some posts that I was sad to leave. I think Poland was one of them. I had a nice house. It was a great school, but nonetheless, moved on.
Uh, could you potentially be assigned to stay on a military base?
Pretty rare. I believe South Korea might be one of those posts, but it's pretty rare. I think the embassy housing in South Korea is on the base, but you may Google that and find out I'm wrong, but I think that's the case.
How do they teach you languages?
So we have a Foreign Service Institute in Arlington, Virginia. And the way it works is when you're in language training, that's your full-time job. It's a great thing. You get your salary, you keep your rank. So we're a lot like the military in that our rank and our salary go with us, whatever job and whatever we're doing, we're always getting what we are. And so you go to class for 4 or 5 hours a day and do 3 hours of homework, and that's your 8 hours. Some people do more homework, but that's on their own, if they need it or not. And then depending on how hard the language is, that will determine how long it lasts. So French and Spanish is about 6 months ish. And then when I took Polish and Vietnamese, that's 44 weeks, considered a moderately hard language. And then some of the super hard languages, we call them, are about 2 years. And so for languages like Arabic and Mandarin and Korean, you'll spend 1 year at the Foreign Service Institute in Arlington, and then they'll send you overseas uh, to a country that speaks that language to get the final push to get that proficiency because it's so hard.
Next question, are there opportunities for a master's degree in healthcare administration?
So our medical providers they're looking for practitioners generally, if you're thinking that. So healthcare administration, that would probably be in the economic track. If you're thinking again from a policy standpoint, um, the economic officers deal with healthcare policy. That being said, if there's other career tracks that interest you, a lot of them, like the Foreign Service Officer jobs, it doesn't matter what your major is. But if you're looking specifically for health administration from the policy perspective, that's economic officer. Yeah, I think that's it.
And from there, what I want to do, I want to wrap up. For the questions that we didn't get to, keep in mind this was recorded, and a lot of the questions were answered during the session. The session will be emailed out sometime tomorrow with a questionnaire. So keep an eye out for that. That'll go directly to your email. So if you did have questions that weren't answered, those certainly were answered during the session. So I would just tell you to definitely go back, give that a listen to get that information. But Dara, we really appreciate you jumping in and sharing your experience, and then on top of that, answering the questions that did come in. Obviously, we have a level of interest here from our populations, but we do thank you for jumping in, presenting, and answering the questions that our populations had.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for your time, and it's great to see so many people logged in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day. Like I said, this will be emailed out, so keep an eye out for that for tomorrow, so you can go back and rewatch the recording. But take care. Thank you again. For those of you that are jumping in, this session was recorded. Make sure you keep an eye out for that, and make sure you're keeping an eye out for other sessions that we have during Career Quest. All right, everyone, have a great rest of the day. Take care.